Sorry, boys. This dyke's got armpit hair. Crap. Come on. Oh my god, that felt like putting a bra on. Let's talk about God's phallus. Hi, my name is Dove. Welcome to my coven. That's my cat. Gatito, say hi. He said hi. I was raised Christian. Now I'm a raging dyke, and I think it's important to theorize about feminist futures. Yes, I took the woke liberal pill. All of this does sound extremely stereotypical. Don't worry, I still have a good old bit of God-fearing, child-rearing, church-adoring zest left in my life. So today we're going to be talking about God's phallus, which is the actual name of an actual book that someone did genuinely write. It's actually an academic book. Wow, that was gorgeous. I found this book by hanging out at my friend's house, who's currently a theology PhD student working towards his thesis. And I looked over to my right on his library, and there it was in all its glory, God's phallus. I was like, why are we writing a whole book about God's phallus? Am I dirty-minded? Am I the problem? Have I been misunderstanding the definition of phallus this whole time? But no, this book is about God's penis. And also, quote, and other problems for men and monotheism. So, if I were still a Christian, and in my experience when I was a Christian, I was terrified to Google anything with a dissenting opinion. I was frightened to even look up Buddhism because I thought that the demons would come through the screen and get me. And now that they've already got me, I'm joking. Yeah, but releasing a bit of that fear and anxiety has opened me up to reading new literature, such as God's phallus. Let me just read out the contents of this book. The introduction is literally titled The Divine Phallus and the Dilemmas of Masculinity. Chapter 1 is Feminism, Freud, and the Father God. Chapter 2 is Analytic Fallacies. Get it? It's spelled like phallus. Phallus and then plural. Chapter 3, The Averted Gaze. Chapter 4, Indecent Exposures. Chapter 5, Genital Speculation. Now you might be questioning why someone sat down to write all of this. Let's continue. Chapter 6. Well, first of all, Chapter 6 is the first chapter in Part 3, which is titled For the Love of God. Part 2 was titled God's Body, the Divine Cover-Up, and Part 1 was titled Divine Fatherhood. As we see more and more excitement around Yesteryear's release and its purchase to the rights by Anne Hathaway, I think it's important to start having conversations about what queering divinity looks like. And that is why I put on my wig and faux bleached my eyebrows and put a stain on my lips so that you would pay attention long enough to not be distracted by my bountiful bosom. Anyway, Chapter 6, Unmanning Israel. Chapter 7, Women Rabbis in the Orchard of Heavenly Delights. And then that leads us into Part 4, Like Father, Like Sons. Chapter 8 is called A Sexless Father and His Procreating Sons. Right now, that chapter starts on page 199, so it's been 199 pages so far of thinly veiled innuendos. Chapter 9, The Virgin Birth and the Sons of God. And the conclusion, Embracing Our Fathers, Theological Musings of a Son. So again, this sounds like a shitpost I pulled off of Tumblr. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it is a real book. I'm bringing this up because, well, I didn't have time to read all of it, and depending on how this video goes, if there is interest, I will, oh my goodness, Gatito, I'm filming, don't lick your booch. Here, I will cover my son's dignity. Depending on how this video is received, if you guys are interested in an actual full deep dive and analysis into divine masculinity and the phallus of our Lord, A lot of things don't make sense to me, so I was just willing to accept that that one was also completely and fully nonsensical. Sue me. Anyway, suddenly I feel brilliant again. The main point of this book was to talk about how we somehow manage in most dominant religions, especially Abrahamic ones, to simultaneously desexualize God, yet associate him with a masculine figure. The somehow simultaneous desexing of our concept of a divine power being hand in hand with the general understanding that aforementioned divine power is a male, despite being genderless, referred to purely with he, him, referred to as a father, necessitating, in as far as Christianity, a virginal female in order to create life, despite being the sexless God of the universe who created all life. This book and then stimulated in me questions regarding our concepts of creation and creative powers and historical rationales for decoupling the capacity for procreation and creation itself from womanhood. This sort of systemic placement of maleness, of masculinity, above any power of the feminine, above any power of the human, period, while simultaneously implying that divinity itself is to be without gender. And while teaching that sexuality, even the having of sexual organs, is a sort of taboo, I think it raises questions for me in regards to, also I'm so sorry about that beeping. Okay. It raises questions for me in regards to essentially our current society in terms of how did we get here. A lot of the theological unpacking you'll see me do on this channel throughout this time is in real time. I'm still sort of deprogramming my brain from certain paths of thinking. And I think that even just reading the introduction and a few, snippets of whichever page I fell to in this book had me really contemplating a few things. So I function best with a list. I'm going to try just speaking based off of the listed topics in each one of these chapters. So the divine phallus and the dilemmas of masculinity. I think about this a lot in terms of when we start to contemplate why seemingly men don't like women, heterosexual men. Why, in terms of attraction, romance, sexuality, oftentimes the securing of a beautiful woman, of this ideal lifestyle, is meant to please other men. This is demonstrated a lot in the idea that everything women do is for the male gaze, and then simultaneously everything men do is also for the male gaze. They listen to male voices who teach them how to attain women for male pleasure, for the goal for a lot of unhealed people is to appease this constantly higher and higher man, which I'm realizing is a direct allegory for religion itself. In fact, in how we conceptualize religion oftentimes is what a more powerful man, in seeking to control the populace, sort of passed down throughout time as a handbook for nations in dominating a population. In fact, in the Christian Bible texts, like it's laid out in their Old Testament, a detailed way to keep your slaves and to rule nations and to subjugate uprisings and to crush oppressors and opponents. There's a lot to unpack in conceptualizing a lot of Christian culture, including Christian nationalism, the integration of Christianity into nation and government as this top-down, trickle-down philosophical economics of who do we live to please? What should we live to serve? And so when we then get into the divine phallus, which it's hard to stay focused when all of this is so almost juvenile, makes me want to giggle, but here, let us read from the intro. The title of this book is shocking because the thought of God having a bleep is shocking. Most Jews and Christians think of God, the Father, as lacking a body and hence as beyond sexuality, which already we're getting the Christian-focused viewpoint. Jewish people don't believe in God the Father. I'm going to just market this as a critique of Christianity because it's the culture I grew up in, and I think there's a huge tendency of Christians to conflate Christian theology with the other Abrahamic religions. He questions where this idea of a disembodied God comes from, and then he brings up, God's relationship with Israel in the Bible, and the dilemmas evoked by a maleness of God. He says the first is homoeroticism, the love of a male human for a male God. The issue of homoeroticism arises in ancient Israel because the divine-human relationship is often described in erotic and sexual terms. Marriage and sexuality are frequent biblical metaphors for describing God's relationship with Israel. God is imagined as the husband to Israel, the wife. Espousal and even sexual intercourse are metaphors for the covenant. Thus, when Israel follows other gods, she is seen to be whoring. Israel's relationship with God is thus conceptualized as a monogamous sexual relation, and idolatry as adultery. But the heterosexual metaphors in the ancient texts belie the nature of the relationship in question. It is human males, not females, who are imagined to have the primary intimate relations with the deity. The Israel that is collectively imagined as a woman is actually constituted by men like Moses and the patriarchs. And these men love, in ways that are imagined erotically and sensually, a male deity. This would not have posed a problem if human masculinity was not so strongly associated with procreation in ancient Israel. Being a man in ancient Israelite culture involved marrying, having children, and carrying forward the lineage of one's father or tribe. Thus, ancient Judaism's concept of masculinity was deeply entangled in images of what is now called heterosexuality. In the culture of ancient Israel, woman was imagined as the natural counterpart of man, and sexual acts between men were condemned. Thus, at the heart of this religious system was a deep tension in defining masculinity. Men were complementary to women. Marriage was a return to a primordial unity. At the same time, a man's relationship to God was conceptualized as loving and sensual. It is for this reason, I propose, so this is his thesis, that various myths and rituals of ancient Judaism attempted to suppress the homoerotic impulse implicit in the male relationship with God. By imagining men as wives of God, Israelite religion was partially able to preserve the heterosexual complementarity that helped define the culture. But this also undermined accepted notions of masculinity, as we shall see in part 3. The feminization of men also disrupted what the tradition posits as a natural complementarity between a divine male and human woman. What? Divine male and human woman. While male-female complementarity is the structure of religious imagery, human women are the natural partners of a divine male. But this connection also renders human males superfluous in the divine-human relationship. It's interesting. It might give insights into the misogynist tendencies of ancient Judaism. Women were deemed impure and men were feminized, in contradiction to what in this religious culture was a natural complementarity between the divine male and human females. So a lot of this intro, and again, I don't claim to think that this book is perfect. I have not read it fully, but I do think contemplating, quote, the sexlessness of the Father God is interesting, especially when we then turn to how divine relationships then inform leaders of the church and its followers, how human relationships should go. It is literally laid out in the Christian Bible that, God is the ruler over man, and man is the ruler over his wife, and the wife over the house, and all of these things. So I think I've never really conceived it as a feminization of a man. And I think too, when we then get angry in that and say, well, it's important to think about why feminization is considered a bad thing. And I think too, it's interesting to consider why, even when women are then celibate, be it for a year or for the rest of their lives, it's also considered a bad thing. I am interpreting this idea of superfluous males as opposed to impure females to be because they serve two masters within this biblical hierarchy. Both their male husband, which is their job to, help him fulfill his divine journey, and the divine man of the sexless God. I'm beginning to confuse myself in the nitty-gritty of it all, but yeah, the divine phallus and the dilemmas of masculinity. Is it gay to constantly look up to and form your thoughts around men? How many men does it take to, become a queer coupling? All right, let's get to part 1 on divine fatherhood. Feminism, Freud, and the Father God, I can only assume, is about the Freudian concept that children want to date their parents, that male children are always going to be seeking out their mothers, and that female children both yearn for a phallus and seek and crave to be their father's partner. Yeah, I don't know if I have much to say on that point. And as I grow from there, finding this text on the divine phallus made me begin to think there's a specific section about the pronouns we use to refer to God. And I was curious why it felt so strange and so alien and almost wrong in the context of my upbringing to refer to God strictly with feminine pronouns, to conceive of her as a maternal and loving force rather than a paternal one. And it took me back to one of the earliest realizations I came to about my feminism and the way that I understand womanhood, in that it's simultaneously hailed as the maker of creation and yet constantly reduced. There's this constant doublethink of the feminine where we are both so, and again, at the risk of coming into gender essentialism, I want to say right off the bat that I am 100,000% supportive of trans rights today and always. And I don't believe in any biological enhancement or prioritization in terms of how we walk through this earth. And I think that that's important to say once we start getting into conversations regarding the divine feminine and divine masculine, because oftentimes they're used as tools of the political right to reinforce this idea that men and women should present themselves in the same way, in a certain fashion for the highest divine good, which inherently is contradictory to the idea of a sexless God who is somehow simultaneously masculine but capable of producing life. And again, I just got into this thought experiment for myself where I wanted to spend a month or at least a week, referring to God with feminine pronouns. And then I started thinking even more about the core of our culture and the way that we refer to women. For example, literally when you say God, there's an implied feminine alternative, goddess. And everything feminine within our society is considered an add-on. You have to add on those letters in order for it to have the same meaning. And even so, goddesses are depicted as highly sexualized beings. I'm just, women as an add-on rather than the origin. And I think I wrote something really good on this topic on Blue Sky, because I'm a Libra, around just how I understand gender and the power of the feminine and the importance of feminism and the oppression we all face, without getting into the gender essentialist take that trans women should be excluded from our spaces. First of all, if you believe that and you're watching this video, leave. You are not invited into the space, and I will never entertain you or your line of thinking. And I think that the most important part is that we have the same life experience. Obviously individual to individual, our lives will always change, but the femininity that exudes from all of us is the same. The oppression that we face, the criticism, the nitpicking, the physical abuse, it is all the same. And all throughout history, it's been trans women fighting for our rights. But even without that, I don't think it's a you owe me, I owe you situation. Any hatred of trans femmes comes from a deliberate misunderstanding of who they are. So make a trans friend today. Because they are lovely people who are the same as us. I literally take estrogen. I'm on birth control for my endometriosis. Bias is never a good thing. But the power of creation, I think, is something that we constantly withhold from women. In this idea that men are this powerful and creating force that go forth and are able to do things through the flick of their hand, the work of their hands, while women are the nurturing force. After the man plants his seed, the woman then fertilizes the earth and allows something to grow. I'm so curious how we got there, because if we're talking biology, the woman is the earth that the man puts the seed into. The seed gets shot out by a bird. I just think it's an interesting thought experiment when you ask yourself, do I truly believe in a genderless God? And if so, why do I feel uncomfortable feminizing her pronouns? And so, I just wanted to get some of those thoughts out there. I think that it's a really important and powerful thing to thank the women in our lives and ask ourselves why we understand womanhood the way that we do. I think that being a lesbian has made it very easy for me in the sense of understanding and accepting trans women and protecting them always, because when you protect a trans woman, you protect all women. You say to the world, you don't get to kill me for the way that I look. You don't get to kill me for what you believe. You don't get to assault me for how you feel inside. There's no justifiable excuse. And the idea that by pushing down another group, we can pull ourselves up is a fallacy implemented by those dominating us. It's the same idea that, colorism and internalized misogyny, in the same way that by being a pick-me girl, you don't make yourself more attractive in others' eyes. By being a misogynist, you don't accomplish anything except further degrade yourself. And as a lesbian, my relationship with gender itself isn't tied to a man's perception of me, which again, it's a difficult concept to sort of wrap your head around. And before you get defensive, I just want you to wait. Because femininity on a whole, when it's understood as the ability to nurture a man's creation, it then becomes a thing of competition of who receives the honor of sitting next to the king and who is most inherently suited for making all of his blessings grow. And again, this was the type of ideology I was raised on. Being a lesbian saved me from a life of degradation and humiliation. I would have been consciously limiting myself in order to appease the divine man's idea of greatness, while not even considering that it is in and of itself a hypocritical comparison, because God is genderless. And when I sat down and asked myself, who created me, who birthed me, who's loved me, and how do I interpret the world around me, it's women. When I was being ferociously antagonized at, a bar, it was the girls around me who stepped in and told the man harassing me to go away. And it's the people with lived female experiences who stand up for me and who relate to me the most. As a woman with hormonal issues, I deeply relate to the experience of trans femmes. As an autistic woman, I understand the experience of not fitting in socially or according to certain required social norms. And as a lesbian, I don't feel that there is a deficit of womanhood to go around. And I feel that that's oftentimes the value expressed by trans misogynists who say, women's accomplishments already are not applauded. And so now we're including someone else, and that diminishes our possible capability. And even when I'm saying that, you have to realize it creates this false sense of scarcity. There is no scarcity in terms of womanhood. It is not womanhood that is being put down. It's this idea that based on the way you look, you should have access to less resources and you should compete over men, over the male prowess, because inherently he has some sort of key to unlock the higher heights you never could on your own. But again, if God is genderless and therefore can be referred to as a she created you. She is everything. If we change our perspective on the gender of God, on her anatomy, on her virality, on her emotions and presence, it changes everything. It changes everything about the way that we as women can view ourselves. So taking that alternative route, what would happen if we joined hands with trans women? And through our organization, we all receive the award that you're so concerned women are going to be losing. And even when you see people arguing over women's sports and who gets the right to perform there, first of all, you never see them investigating trans male athletes. And unfortunately now I'm seeing that there's a trend of print checking, which I think is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of. But again, that's in a sense to prove your masculinity. I've had friends tell me about how they've had their Adam's apples checked to see if they're like a quote unquote real man. And it's to test not if you're a leech or taking away from something, but if you're good enough to participate and qualify. Because there's no idea in any man's head that, a woman on testosterone would be able to beat them. Men think they could beat Serena Williams and they've never even picked up a tennis racket. So again, it's this idea of this male powerful force just knocking all of the female athletes out of the water. Which, if you believe that as a woman, you admit that you think, despite all of the work you put in, no matter how hard you try, with one hand tied behind his back, and the use of only his thumb, a man could beat you. So what you're saying within that isn't that you believe it's the hormonal state of a man that makes him more powerful than you, nor is it his body. Because trans women are on hormones and they get their blood tested and they are women. Like, you know, they go through a second puberty and their whole bodies change. They have the same things flowing through them as we do us. So you're saying what makes a man more powerful than you is his penis. And first of all, that's pretty Freudian. Second of all, it's untrue. Trans women are delicate and beautiful, or they're strong and powerful, but either or, they're extremely feminine and wonderful. And I think when you worship a genderless God, you have to ask yourself, why am I making such a huge deal? How can I believe a God without gender would enforce a system that mandates one? And to whose interest does it serve that I believe I am a fertilizer? That I believe I'm only as good as the dirt around me? To whose benefit does it that I have mentally enslaved myself to believe that my role is that of a supporter's and should be always? Conceptualizing God as a woman, and in turn thinking of all of the women who got me to where I am now, makes me genuinely emotional, because it just makes so much sense. And so I hope that in contemplating God's phallus, or lack thereof, we're able to question a lot of these deeper biases present in our day-to-day lives. This topic got a lot more into gender discourse than I maybe intended it to, but I don't know if I regret it. I feel uncomfortable even bringing it up because it feels so inherent and natural to me that trans women are women, that it's like I don't even feel the need to put the qualifier in front of it. You know, when you say women, I mean tall women, short women, black women, white women. Like, it feels weird to draw that distinction for me, and I don't want this to be the type of place where we have to do that or worry about that. But I'm also realizing that inherently in having an online audience, you don't necessarily know me. So you don't know if you're safe, you don't know where I stand, and I don't know you, I don't know where you stand. This could be your first introduction to contemplating why you feel the way you do about trans women, about femininity, masculinity, and the divineness of it all. So it's important to say what I said, and hopefully moving forward as we establish a larger community, it becomes more inherent in the quality of whatever I say that it is including all of my brothers and sisters. And I think it's important to realize that, like, we're all dolls. We're all dolls. If you are a femme, and that's why this is Femme University. There's no lack of femininity to go around, and we do not have to be in competition with each other. People say that, but they don't think it through. Because again, if you're competing for who gets to serve the male human lord of your life, if you yourself believe you're only as good as your accomplishments because you are essentially fertilizer, of course you're going to want to limit the competition. But I don't attach my womanhood to my genitals, because I conceive of my womanhood as how I feel inside. I think that's the reason I've never been transphobic. Like, if you were to meet me as a child, when it was first explained to me, I got it. I think inherently believing in a soul eliminates that other question that people bring up as a cop-out of, are you saying that God makes mistakes? Girl, you're wearing contact lenses right now. Did God make a mistake? You have hair extensions in. Did God make a mistake? You paint your nails. Did God make a mistake? Actually, you have clothes on right now. Are you ashamed of your body? Girl, you get liposuction. Did God make a mistake? Why are you starving yourself skinny? Did God make a mistake? Why are you feeding yourself? God would have included the food. Take your glasses off then. Don't get braces, actually. Actually, stop brushing your teeth. Why did God make a mistake? It's an invalid argument. It's invalid. Think about how you feel inside. Detach your femininity from your fear of your vagina. Because we have people who don't even take a mirror and look down there. Sit with yourself and question, who am I? You don't have to be afraid of what comes up. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, first of all, my look for the day, and second of all, what I had to say. Thanks for coming to the coven. Bye. Can I read it? Dang. Lar. And everything is just trying to confuse me. So, sure, let's allow it. What's the worst that could happen? My laptop could explode. Hopefully this is the whole book. Is this the whole ding dang, fling flang? Ah, wonderful. Right. What if I put this chair? Does it go any lower? No, because this is right after my girlfriend used it, and she loves, whenever I use a chair after my girlfriend did, I'm like, why is there no space at all for me? Yay, it's my baby. Here, I want to include him, but I also want to get as little as of the ugly. I love my baby. Okay, this is honestly perfect. Okay.